So the framework that we're going to talk to you about today that Kris has developed is called Responsible IT Architecture. This has once again been designed over the last 6 or 7 years. We've been implementing this for our clients. We formalized the name and the framework and the standard that we're living with today. And at Integris, if you are a customer, you're either on this framework, getting towards this framework. And if you're a new prospective customer, this is getting talked to you about from day one. Literally, probably the second conversation we're having with you is about responsible IT architecture, what it is, what it means, and how are we going to get you there if you're not currently there. The 9 points of responsible IT architecture. We are clearly going to go in depth about each single one of these, but this is the visual. As I mentioned, this is where we're at today, and this framework will continuously evolve over time. As we all know, most of us being in this space, that these threats are constantly evolving. Literally every single day, we're hearing about a new variation of ransomware or a different style of attack that hasn't been done before. And how do we defend against those? What does the tool set look like? What do the processes look like? And what are the people needed to then go and implement those things? So this is the overall framework. This is where it stands today. There's currently 9 items, and we're going to go through each and every one of those for you. First is our network firewall, or what we like to call the edge of the network. And a lot of times, Kris and I come into organizations by we probably do 1,000 assessments a year of all different types of businesses, industries, sizes, and we are constantly starting with this. It's the edge of the network, the first thing that the internet touches or that the users are going out through. And what we typically find on that network firewall is either an end of life or out of date piece of equipment, or which in obvious needs hasn't caught up or needs to be replaced as the manufacturer is stating. Or on the other end, we're finding really good equipment, the right equipment, next generation versions of this that have not been properly configured and set up for success to not only prevent the threats of today, but also to work with the back-end environment to make sure that everything is kosher between the firewall, the users, and the internet. When you think about responsible IT architecture, what drove this for you?
Anthony, that's a great question. And the thinking around the responsible IT framework, again, you mentioned it's a framework, it's not a product. It's how we think about security and uptime and business recovery for our clients. Frankly, I can compare this to a seatbelt. When in 1959, when Volvo came up with a 3-point seatbelt, it was not a mandatory thing at that time. Right now, we cannot imagine getting in a car, driving a car, and not putting the seatbelt on. That's really what responsible IT architecture is for our clients, meaning that we want to make sure that all the clients that we're IT department for have the seatbelt fastened.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a great way to think about it. I think of like the Teslas nowadays of all these third camera systems and LiDAR and all this stuff that's out there. We're literally talking about the foundational items that you need. We're not talking about the bells and whistles. You know, I usually say there's probably thousands of layers. There's thousands of vendors in this space, all doing a tweak on this, that, or the other thing. This is literally 1959 Volvo seatbelts.
That's exactly right. And I think is that to your point, you can think of that this doesn't cover everything. There's MDR, there's XDR, there's things that we can layer on top of that. So with Integris doesn't say this is everything that you have to do. Integris says this is the minimum that you have to do in order to be safe.
Awesome. That first one on the list there, that network firewall, specifically, we call it obviously the edge of the network. We typically see 2 versions of this, and then obviously there's a middle ground too. Version 1 is completely outdated, end of life. The manufacturer is no longer providing patches. It's dead on the doorstep when we do these assessments and evaluate people's networks, and it just clearly needs to be replaced. That's easy. The other end of this that we see a lot of the times is the firewalls that the client took the right recommendation. they took the right answer. They invested the right amount of money into the solution. But when we get in there and evaluate it, it's not set up properly. They're not getting what they paid for. They bought the Ferrari and they're not getting the speed or the torque or the horsepower. Explain to us what you see when you go in and touch these specific devices.
Like you said, firewall, edge of the network, which is essentially where this is the only wall that separates our office network that holds all that information that the organization owns from the internet, which is literally the Wild West, right? So we want to make sure that number one, it exists and it's the right wall. To your point, we're seeing good systems. We're seeing systems that are end of life. We're seeing systems that are misconfigured. But and this is all obviously not the right thing. It's our job to make sure that we fix those up and we make them right. But then on the top of this, Anthony, what's really important thing is that this is not set and forget it kind of a system, right? So what we need to do is that we need to keep an eye on that, because if this is a vehicle that translates that private traffic from your organization network traffic to the internet, we got to make sure that we know what's flying back and forth through that. So this is something, again, if you do this, if you pay attention to it, you can get a tremendous amount of intelligence out of that system. And that's where we want to make sure it's also happening. It's not just like one-time investment. We do the settings, we put a configuration on that box and we move on. No, we pay attention to this too. We audit. We want to make sure that the firewall that we have in place is being audited on a regular basis. This is a living and breathing mechanism. So there's a little bit more to it rather than just putting that in place and kind of letting it go.
Another thing we've seen, Kris, on this one specifically is the way people purchased firewalls, let's call it 5 to 10 years ago versus now with the current threats. And we like to say a lot of times folks were buying boxes. Back in the day, I bought the box, I plugged it in, I set it up, and I'm good to go. I got the green light and I never looked at it again. As you just mentioned in your commentary there, this is not a set it and forget it tool anymore or a system. This is something that needs to be continuously monitored and reported on, adjusted, tweaked, configured. And by the way, I forget the length of time you gave me, but I think it's approximately 2 years is the life expectancy of these devices based on the speed of internet now, the threats that are coming out. Touch a little bit on that from what you're seeing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Maybe 2 years, maybe we can stretch it a little bit longer. But the thing is that, to your point, firewall was one of those investments that you're making in your cybersecurity posture within an organization. Frankly, that it's, if you buy this box, like you just mentioned, it's probably one of the worst investments that you're making. And what I mean by this, I'm not saying you don't need a firewall. What I'm saying is that the best way to manage or to handle the firewalls within environments these days is to engage in subscription-based firewalls, right? So we have a flexibility because not only cybersecurity landscape is dictating what are we going to do and how we're going to do the firewall for the organization, but to your point, bandwidth changes. How many times do we see a organization that purchased a very expensive firewall? They got a lot of good licenses that are subscribed to this firewall. But now that ISP is calling them and say that we're happy to extend a promotion to you and we're going to bump your bandwidth by, let's say, double that. That happens. And then we get a call from the client saying, hey, we don't see this bandwidth. The internet is still the way it was before. Yes, because that wall, that connector between the internet and your private network is still the same. And that little box or big box has certain technical specification that dictate how fast your internet can be. So in this situation, if you made an investment, you're stuck with that investment. In a typical subscription-based firewall, you can upgrade to a different model, different level of the firewall, and then you can take advantage of all the benefits that come with that. And one of them is just taking advantage of the bandwidth that you just got from your ISP.